Right. Lior, I wanted to start off with you about what the economy is doing here and what we've been seeing in the economy. And we've been looking and talking in the past about the economy and how it's doing. And we're starting to see housing bubbles all around, and they're starting to pop. We're hearing the Fed out there. They're raising the interest rates, and they're telling us that, the economy's doing well, but the only thing that could bring it down is maybe the trade wars that Trump is pushing. And I just wanted to get your take on how you think the economy is doing at this point. Do you think the economy is actually improving, or do you think we're heading towards something a lot more sinister?
Well, in general, I think the economy is improving. I think it's changing a lot. From back in 2008, it was such a momentous moment that it changed the trajectory of the United States. It changed the global trajectory as well. And what we're seeing right now is the end of a very, very long recovery. And therefore, it confuses most investors and most savers, business people, etc., because they say, okay, this has been a very long economic expansion, and I feel like there's a recession around the corner at all times. In fact, since about 2012, people have been saying there's a recession coming. There's a double dip recession. There's a fiscal cliff. So many jargons have come along in the last 9 years to predict a recession. But it looks like Trump and the election of Trump released the middle class back into the days of more spending, more consumer spending, more business confidence. Businesses are expanding. There's a lot of positives that are happening right now, along with a lot of negatives. So, I've talked about this in the past. For example, the unemployment rate is very low, but that's on the flip side. You got 100 million Americans not in the workforce. So you got about a third of the country not working anymore. Obviously, the rest of the 2/3 will have a better time, an easier time finding employment. So you have better employment rates. And so if I were to kind of see where we are, I would say we're 2/3 of the way through this economics expansion. And so Wealth Research Group sees a major rally, a relief rally, once many of these problems that are now plugging us get resolved. This could be the trade war, this could be Europe, this could be North Korea, anything that's on the agenda, anything that's noise right now. Once it gets resolved in some sort of way, there's going to be a major rally because we haven't seen the top yet. This is not what a euphoria looks like. But what is very concerning is what I call the advancing illusion. I just wrote about this, and I think this is very important to investors because a stock market can top well before a recession hits. It can be a year away. And so when I say that I see a recession coming, obviously, like any other time in history where after expansion there's recession, I see that the recession is coming 2-3 years away. But the market top could come much sooner. And one of the indicating signals of this is what I call the advancing illusion. I just wrote about this at the newsletter, and I created a special report about this for your listeners today. If you want to go to wealthresearchgroup.com/now, because this is something that's happening right now, and investors should understand this. And the advancing illusion is the fact that the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, and the Dow are advancing. And so investors and momentum traders are joining the parade. They are putting new money into the stock market, but there are only a tiny group of companies, only 10 companies in the S&P 500 are taking the S&P 500 index up. In other words, 10 companies are advancing and 490 are lagging. But if you look at it as a composite whole, you're thinking the trend is up. But if you break it down and you look under the hood, there's a huge problem, And when the S&P 500 advance to decline ratio is so concentrated, that has predicted and anticipated many market tops, 2008, 2000, and well before that. And so this is something very important that investors need to understand right now. But the economy itself is doing very, very well. I mean, I've been around the U.S. now for 3 months touring major cities, heartland. Overall, this is a very good time for the economy. And I say this again, comparatively to where we were a few years ago. This is definitely not the United States, where it has a thriving middle class and a huge expansion. The GDP numbers are rigged, unemployment numbers are manipulated, inflation numbers are definitely manipulated, and so and I've talked about this in the past as well. You cannot talk about the U.S. as if it's one country anymore. The 52 states are very different. You can have a booming state and a lagging state. And so this is another theme that's very new on the table right now, Dave, and I think people should understand this. The United States don't look at the national stats anymore. Look at your own areas, because your real estate market could be booming while other ones are lagging. And save for the fact that the stock market encompasses the entire country, overall, we are looking at a country that is very divided, whereas, one state can be booming because it has zero income tax, positive migration, lots of new businesses opening up, and another state can be, plagued with pension problems and too many retirees and higher taxes, not good for retirement, bad weather, people are moving. So it's very dynamic right now, much more than in the past. And this is a critical point in terms of how you look at where you live going forward, where you business, where you transact going forward, and just in general the U.S. economy as it pertains to your life.
Now, with everything that you're saying with, the economy and illusionary numbers, and we know this, we talked about this before, unemployment, GDP, and the rest, with the economy and everything the way it's going right now, we see that there are certain states within the United States that decided to, legalize cannabis one way or another, either legalize recreational use or legalized it recreational and medical, or just legalized medical. Now, Mel, you just took a cannabis company public, and, thanks to the legalized industry, we're seeing, better grades in schools, less drug use, less crime, less alcohol, more tax revenue, better awareness. What is the way forward for this industry? Where do you see it going?
Well, Dave, this is an industry that really was around the world for thousands of years, and cannabis was a product, an ancient medicine, and a product that was used in many walks of life. Only over the last 100 years has it been prohibited from the population, which began in the U.S. and then propagated around the world. This medicine has been rediscovered, if you will, and through various means of bringing down these prohibition walls, through medical discoveries. In Canada, medical cannabis became legalized due to an epileptic patient that challenged an arrest that he had been put under for plants that he was found in possession of, and the courts indeed found that he was required to have this product because he had tried all of the existing therapies that existed for epilepsy, and they were all not effective in preventing them the way this product did. And this led to the opening of the doors for Health Canada to mandate safe access to medical cannabis for those that required it for a growing list of medical therapies. It's been known for a long time. There's a long list of illnesses that cannabis was used for, 80 that we know clinically, potentially hundreds. And this is a medicine that's been used, unfortunately, in the gray market or black market for umpteen years. And now it's becoming from an unregulated, basically coming to a regulated market. And the world may very well, or America may very well go into a recessionary stage, but this is an industry that's really beginning from zero. There is no place to go except up. In the case of Canada, it's the first G7 country that has legalized cannabis on a federal level. And what this means is Canadians are first, these companies that are licensed, such as ours, are first able to conduct research in ways that never was allowed before. And we're able to produce medical products that can be commercialized and produced at scale, like your modern products. And these will ultimately be distributed through pharmacies, which Canada has just introduced legislation to introduce cannabis in pharmacies and other channels. And ultimately, this is what is happening around the world. There's 20 countries right now that have legalized cannabis for medical purposes. A country like Germany, for example, has laws for cannabis medical use, where you can get a prescription from your physician and go to your local pharmacy and purchase some cannabis if they have any in stock. And that's the problem. The country does not produce any and relies upon countries like Canada and the Netherlands, the only two countries that can legally export cannabis for medical purposes that is made in a particular pharmaceutical grade, which doesn't currently happen in places like the United States because the laws just aren't there. And this opens up the doors for a vast market that's billions and billions of dollars, and really, again, starting from zero. So the way forward, Dave, is it's a bastion of opportunity, really a land grab, if you will, for companies like ours that really are the first movers into a brand new sector that is burgeoning, and will be a part of everyday life very soon for people around the world, United States included. And Canada is years ahead. Our regulations are very robust to allow for the industry to exist in a very regulated manner that allows for quality control and safety of the consumer. And that's our interest, is to protect the consumer in the end, and give them access to safe, trusted product. And so the way forward is very exciting, and it would behoove your investors to and your viewers to really look into the industry and the potential it offers, given that it's not quite there within the U.S. borders when you're talking about federal legislation, but it is soon to come. But you'll have an opportunity to start enjoying the moves forward that companies like ours are making in Canada and elsewhere.
Mel, is there anything on the board here where at a federal level in the United States where they're looking to make it completely legal throughout the United States? Because right now there are certain states that are legalized it for recreational or medical usage. Is there anything on a higher level, a federal level, that's going to legalize it all across the United States?
So the medical, in the United States, 30 states have legislation for medical cannabis, and as well the District of Columbia, and 8 states have legalized cannabis for recreational use, and many more that are about to come. Now, these states have shown in tremendous benefit, as you mentioned, in better grades in school, less drug use, less crime, and so forth, increased taxes for the states, where all this money was before going into organized crime. It's a very obvious and logical path where the only opponent against legalization of cannabis really is the DEA, because they're definitely afraid of losing their budget to fight their war on quote unquote drugs. And so there is the Democrats, I believe, and with a bipartisan bill, have proposed a bill so far as I know, and I don't follow the U.S. regulations as tightly as Canadian and elsewhere in the world, because it is frankly a few years away, but the dominoes have started falling with over half the states now with medical regulations in place, and seeing that the sky is not falling in these parts. It's not a matter of if, it's really a matter of when, and we believe it's going to be within the next 3 to 5 years.
Lior, right now we've touched upon cannabis as an investment opportunity. After 10 years of the U.S. equity bull market, is this even the time to be risking money, or is preservation of capital the top priority right now?
That's a great question. So in terms of how you build and construct a portfolio, when you have an environment of rising interest rates, the valuation multiples of companies in general, they come down. In other words, when interest rates in the economy are higher, there are other options for investors other than stocks. When interest rates are zero, for example, and most bonds or safer bonds are close to zero, then the S&P 500 is a default position that people and money managers and pension funds, etc., they prefer to cash. In other words, the S&P 500 pays a little dividend, or an enormous dividend in terms of compared to money market accounts or bank accounts. So people, instead of staying in cash, they stay at the S&P 500. That is something that creates a situation where the S&P 500 is enjoying very long bull markets and very short bear markets throughout decades. And as you raise interest rates, you're creating a situation where the dividends are more important than capital appreciation, because as you raise interest rates, the valuations of companies go down. It becomes less advantageous to own stocks as a trader, where you have other alternatives such as high-yielding MLPs or high-yielding REITs or junk bonds or many other alternatives, and commodities that love higher interest rates because that means that the economy is getting better. So as a whole, it's always worth it to risk money if you can create a positive return on investment. But in the years ahead, the broad indices or the general equities that have prospered for so long, they will not do as well as they've done for the last 9 years because of higher interest rates, because of their higher valuations already. In other words, if you look at Apple or Microsoft or Nvidia, the companies that have enjoyed tremendous capital appreciation, these companies are projected to have a 7.5% to 8% yield going forward annually for the next 5 to 10 years. They're not going to be the place to make money, or to make double-digit returns. Whether or not you should be focused on capital preservation or on capital appreciation has to do with how much risk tolerance you're willing to assume on your portfolio and how experienced you are. And if we're kind of indirectly asking about the cannabis industry, what investors need to understand is that in the long run, the best companies are what are called legacy companies or dividend aristocrats, companies that are able to be more profitable each and every year. Interest rates are up, down, recession, it doesn't matter. These companies are able to create such a competitive advantage around their products or services that they have either brand loyalty or they have an economics, a low cost advantage. It can be anything that creates a situation where these companies are able to just grow more and more robust. And if you can find them cheap, then you're creating a situation where in 15 to 20 to 25 years, your portfolio has grown to be that millionaire next door type. Now, as it pertains to my portfolio, as you know, what I did with regards to my precious metals, physical precious metals, I took 24 months worth of lifestyle burn rate and converted that fiat into an allocation of precious metals. So in other words, if my lifestyle burn rate is about $5,000 a month, then I times that by 24, and I take that 120,000 and I convert it into fiat. I convert it into precious metals, put it in vaults, and that's it. I'm done. I'm safe. I've hedged myself with 2 years worth of my lifestyle at these level of the dollar. And obviously, if something ever happens, then you're more than hedged. You can do that with offshore real estate. You can do that with many other ways. For that particular part of my portfolio, I think that has to do with preservation of capital. Then I have what's called a whole life insurance, which is a very unique type of life insurance that is available for Americans. And above that, I have cash outside the banking system and other real assets that are outside the banking system. So that has to do with preservation of capital, because the real problem is only what you have in pure cash is susceptible to a major problem. I'm here in Seattle right now, and I just got handed about 20 bills worth $100 trillion each of Zimbabwean currency as a gift, like from a friend. You gotta imagine that 30 years ago, that country was the biggest exporter in Africa. Zimbabwe. It was a huge, robust economy. And that 100 trillion had enormous purchasing power. Now today it has literally collector's value. That's it. It's just amazing to see 14 zeros on a piece of government paper buying you nothing, being passed around as a joke. And so if there's a currency problem, you don't want to be in cash. But if something is denominated in cash, say your computer, etc., and the dollar zeroes out tomorrow, it doesn't mean that your computer is worth zero. It means it's worth $0. So just make sure you realize that there's a difference between owning assets that you can denominate in all sorts of currencies. You can denominate them in Bitcoin. You can denominate them in gold, and they have value, and some of them appreciate in value, and the rest of the problem is just being in cash. So for me, about 70% of the portfolio is always going to be in what I call legacy companies. You can go to the website to wealthresearchgroup.com, and you can look at the top menu. We have one button that says wealth stocks and another one that says dividend mania. You can learn about these, you can educate yourself, and you can become a genuine investor. And then with the rest of the money, you can speculate because you already have that core to your portfolio. You're building wealth, and you can use many advanced strategies, such as you can use 1 year's worth of dividends in order to speculate. So you're not going out of pocket in order to risk with high potential companies that have higher risk as well. And so if we're looking at a company like Mel's company that just went public about a week ago, you're looking at a situation where there's 36 publicly traded companies in Canada that have this medical grade license from the government. And Pure Global Cannabis is, out of those 36, they're the fourth cheapest one. So there's 32 companies that have a higher market cap than Pure Global Cannabis. And if you're looking at the average one has a market cap of 975 million Canadian, whereas Pure Global Cannabis has about a $50 million Canadian market cap. So you're looking at a company that's, as of today, is about 94% cheaper than the average of these 36 companies that Mel's company needs to compete with. Obviously, some of them are producers, and Pure Global Cannabis is going to start producing, I believe, in Q1 of 2019, or the facility will be ready to Q1 19. So all the growth is not even there yet. It's not baked in the price. So these are the type of situations that I personally like. And the idea is that if you have that core, if you're building wealth for the long term, then there's sophisticated ways we talk about in wealthresearchgroup.com on how to take money not out of your own pocket and speculate with small cap companies because this is the key. The key is to understand how to position with the right size of an order, of a trade, and how to diversify within asset classes, and how to hedge yourself by going short other sectors as well. So it's all a balancing act. But yes, obviously, it's always a great time to risk if you know what you're doing, because that is how you build wealth.
So, Mel, let's focus on the company you founded. Now, 18% of the shares are controlled by yourself, so you have a lot to gain or lose, depending on how your company does. Now, the key to success in a commodity-based business, such as manufacturing a plant, is to be low-cost producer like Walmart, or to have a special branding power like Apple. Has your team been able to crack these key competitive aspects?
Absolutely, Dave. When I started this business and being a pharmacist by profession, I knew I, for one, is not going to be the one that's going to grow this product. And to be able to really be sustainable in any business, like you said, you need access to low-cost raw material. And to be able to be competitive in the long run, the first thing I set out to do was find the top commercial horticulturists that I could. You got to remember that cannabis has still been a gray market product for so many years, where modern horticulture techniques were not able to be introduced to it. It's been grown in underground basements or farm barns or what have you. And the modern horticulture methodologies that are currently available to us enable products such as cannabis to be produced at scale and at a fraction of cost that otherwise would be available. And so for the last 3 years, our company has been actually focused on research and development in the various hydroponic methodologies employed by the cannabis sector, including ebb and flow or deep water culture, aquaponics, aeroponics, bubbleponics. And we found a lot of benefits and a lot of positive attributes to some of these methodologies, as well as a lot of negative aspects. And our world-class grower, who has a Master's of Science in Biotechnology and also a PhD level education in horticulture, built one of the largest academic facilities in Asia, and has worked in Netherlands, in Japan, China, and has built large-scale commercial facilities that are producing tons of and converting and processing tons of commercial produce a day. With him, we have developed what we call a multiponic hydroponic system, which will enable the product to be grown utilizing modern horticulture methodologies. These plants are grown in a lower stature, such that you're not wasting energy into the stalk and into the leaves, such that these often the stalk and the roots are all thrown away, obviously, and that can be reduced substantially. Also, smaller plants require less light, so this leads to further efficiencies. Furthermore, what we can deploy is a vertical system that can use the vertical space in any square footage, and that increases your scalability and economies of scale tremendously. So given all these attributes, we have developed a unique system that will enable us to produce cannabis at scale at a fraction of the cost, and utilizing the benefits of indoor vertical farming. If you know about vertical farm plants, they produce much higher grade nutrition when it comes to produce. We're anticipating the same for cannabis as well, which, and I say anticipate because we have yet to validate this product for cannabis. We're in the process of doing that, and this is also why this is the opportune time for investors to get in. We are again at the ground floor. We have yet to announce the many attributes that are coming down the pipeline, including validation of our production system for cannabis. We've already validated for various products similar to cannabis, but since we've recently achieved our license to actually study cannabis and grow cannabis, we are now deploying that system, and soon that'll be validated. And based on what we've seen in other produce, when we translate that to this product, we're seeing about a 2 to 3 minimum fold increase in production over traditional methodologies. And at peak capacity, we believe we may be able to achieve 5 times over traditional methodologies. And that includes 6 harvests per year, and also deploying high efficiency systems that will lend to low cost product. Now, the industry is actually heading towards commoditization, and we don't want to invest heavy into large scale square footages, which are going to be ever difficult to manage. And it's never really the farmer that gets rich. Although we're going to be experts in the product, what we will produce is our niche products that are focused on indoor high quality. But the products of the future are really going to be your commercialized processed products that are converted into various shapes and forms, medically speaking, which will be our first focus. There's an array of products that will come out, including transdermal patches, sublingual sprays, soft gel capsules, time release, all designed for certain therapeutic effects. And once we have access to large-scale production through joint ventures and focused on our own production methodology, where we can produce a high-quality, premium medical grade, we'll be able to use the extracted low-cost products as well as the high-quality products we produce to produce the products of the future, which will be on the pharmacy shelves and retail shelves, both in Canada and ultimately around the world. And so to crack that competitive advantage, I knew that we needed access to a sustainable source of low-cost products. So that's where our focus had begun. And going forward, we are now looking at the cannabis, what I call 3.0, where it's leading to those commercialized products that are produced at scale in a certain environment that is pharmaceutical, and that's the ultimate opportunity to get into our company at a ground floor level where you're going to achieve the benefits of our future growth ahead.
Mel, let me just ask you this question. Do you think in the future we will actually see cannabis in like Walmart or Target or those type of stores?
Absolutely. CBD, which is one of the key components of cannabis, THC being the other, has less of the psychoactive properties. And many of your listeners may already know that CBD is becoming more and more readily available. In Canada, it's still considered a narcotic, but very, very soon, we believe it'll be considered a nutraceutical product, and it'll be included in a lot of your daily supplements. The reason is that CBD is shown to exhibit some tremendous medical benefits, preventive in many diseases such as Alzheimer's, very beneficial for sleep, certain inflammations in the body. And it is found to be one of the key medically active components of cannabis, but not producing that high, if you will. So users can use it safely and not worry about having issues with driving and people sort of doped up, if you know what I mean, which lends to that stigma that is still existent around cannabis. Ultimately, THC products, I don't know if they'll end up in a Walmart, perhaps in a pharmacy section, because THC products have a sort of a component that is more psychoactive. It is more likely to be in a separately sold, similar to alcohol. But given that alcohol is sold in all kinds of environments today, and given that cannabis actually has a much better toxicity profile than alcohol and cigarettes and quite a few other products that are sold on retail shelves, it is actually very possible that ultimately you will be seeing cannabis products outside of the CBD, which I believe are going to be sold very soon, and they're probably already talking to CBD producers in developing their lines of products, and we certainly want to be beginning those conversations and are beginning those conversations to ultimately be supplying CBD-based products. But ultimately, THC-based products will also enter that foray, representing even a larger market expansion capacity down the road.
Now, Leora, I was just thinking about this with Trump's policies, with all these tariffs on China. He's renegotiating NAFTA. I mean, will this impact cannabis or any other industry? I mean, do you see this being a problem?
I think what's going on right now in terms of Trump's policies is that the media likes to hate Trump. And we saw in Jerome Powell's testimony in the past 2 days that the Federal Reserve actually is trying to shift the focus and the blame for whatever is going to come next if they can't manage the interest rate cycle to Trump's policies. In other words, what the media and the Federal Reserve are trying to do is say that because Trump is rattling the cage, renegotiating all of these problematic structures that the U.S. has allowed by outsourcing their manufacturing base, selling their secrets to their commercial secrets to all of these low labor countries, and basically becoming a service economy with 72% of the GDP coming from consumption. He's trying to change that. Now, whether or not he will succeed is another debate. But the fact is that you cannot create a situation in a country as robust as the U.S. where everyone is against, or all the establishment is against, a president that is very dangerous. In general, tariffs and what he's trying to impose on China, in the bigger picture, it's not a huge problem. There are 48 countries in the world, so almost a quarter of the world's countries have cheaper manufacturing bases than China today. China has become a richer country than 20, 25, 30 years ago. And so it's a different relationship with the Chinese. And as we know, they have stopped to increase their treasury holdings. So it's a very different situation with them. And we should understand that what Trump is doing is pro-business. He's trying to rejuvenate America with pro-business policies. One of them being, obviously, production. Now, one of the things about cannabis is it's a non-source. You can't outsource manufacturing cannabis. If you are growing agriculture in the United States, then that is where you're growing it. And this is one of America's largest exports, is agriculture. So this is something that Trump will definitely be thinking about. Obviously, he campaigned on states' rights, and two congressmen have just introduced the States Act, where they basically are saying in the language that if a state has legislated cannabis, the federal government has nothing to do with this anymore. You cannot create a situation where the FBI or any federal agency stops a state that has already legalized cannabis. So this is on the table. This is coming soon in September. So if this goes through, this is essentially like legalizing federally in the United States. Now, Trump is a businessman, and when he sees the friends in the North legalizing cannabis, and who knows, maybe exporting cannabis like Canada is going to obviously start doing, and all these businesses and tourism goes to Canada, he will not hesitate for too long to do the same in the United States. You cannot lose another gigantic industry like cannabis, which hasn't even seen R&D budgets going in. All these pharmaceutical companies, the giants, have not come into this industry because it's federally legal. And so there's so much money to be made with cannabis that obviously, an economy as robust as the U.S. cannot afford to lose time. And they are losing time right now. So Trump's policies, in the end, I believe, will be very pro-cannabis. He's already stated this many times. He has basically allowed the Attorney General to say what he wants regarding cannabis, but he hasn't given them a budget to implement anything. So, when you see that the Attorney General is running around saying cannabis is a problem, etc., it's useless because he doesn't have the budget to do anything with it. In fact, here in Seattle, where I'm at right now, tomorrow I'm meeting with Congressman Roger Goodman, who is behind the legislation in Washington state and leading the legislation nationwide. And I'll have much more updates in the newsletter next week. But this is out of the bag already. California, which is a market that is even bigger than the entire country of Canada, 39 million inhabitants, 250 million tourists, has legalized. Nothing is happening. All the people that thought that this would be a problem are, proven wrong. Just imagine this, Dave. Just go back about 5 years and imagine cannabis is illegal and alcohol is illegal and cigarettes are illegal. And then you legalize only cigarettes and alcohol. And you legalize opioids or other medicine. 5 years later, you're hearing about domestic violence, people drunk driving, people dying from diseases to the heart, diseases to the liver, getting cancer. What would you legalize if you had to go back? I mean, it's not even, it's so unique, the situation with what has happened with cannabis. And I think part of the reason is that tobacco you cannot grow in your house, alcohol you cannot distill very easily in your house, but cannabis is easily grown. And so these lobbyists have had to work so hard in the cigarette industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, and in the alcohol industry to keep it illegal because it burns their business model. And obviously we're already seeing it, and it's a shame, but it's what's going on in the United States, where politicians can be bought and lobbyists is actually considered an occupation that people flock to. So in the long run, in a few years, with the whole world legalizing, this is not something that the United States will be the exception to the rule. They will obviously be legalizing as well, and hopefully this will happen soon rather than later, because the opportunity is massive.
Just to give people an idea of what states, legalize recreational or medical use of it. I mean, if we look at it, you see Colorado, Nevada, California, Oregon, Washington, both recreational and medical. We also see Vermont, Massachusetts, Alaska, and then just for medical, we have Florida, we have New Mexico, Arizona, we have Minnesota, Illinois, and there's many others. So it is spreading, and a lot more states are coming aboard. Mel, let me ask you, what is the timeline for your company in the next year?
Well, Dave, we have quite a vast pipeline of product development that we have in store. As I mentioned earlier, commercialization of products is the next stage for our company. And so we're looking at several dozen products that we've identified as products that are going to be sought after by consumers, especially on the medical side, but soon to follow the recreational as well. So over the next 12 months, we are expanding our footprint. Again, as you mentioned earlier, Q1 we're expecting our own production to come online. But prior to that, we're actually going to begin sales very soon, before the end of this year, because our model is very unique to any of the other LPs in that we're going to be able to achieve our sales license without actually producing any cannabis in terms of growing it. We realized that once we were out of the gates, there were going to be a number of other growers that will have product inventories that come online where they can't move all that product at once. In all our modeling, there's a bubble of product that comes online, and wholesale is a large part of any producer's business model. And realizing this, we began our model focused on packaging, creating sustainable packaging that's going to be very unique and desirable by the consumers, and looking at medical products that will have, for example, higher bioavailability, better absorption, more targeted approach in terms of what it's being used for. And so over the next year, we are, again, deploying a strategy that will enable us to register patients by the end of this year, medical patients, that is, through our affiliation with one of the largest medical groups in Canada that has about 7 million patients in their database. We will be looking to deploy a strategy where we're educating physicians and developing a sort of a a trusted relationship amongst physicians, because most of the other producers are focused on recreation, and the medical community does not look favorably upon necessarily on any recreational product, even cannabis, though it is toxically speaking much less toxic than alcohol and cigarettes. So given that, we are looking to commercialize another array of products that are going to be legalized in about a year. Currently, we can only sell dried flower, oil in sort of a bottle with a dropper, and gel caps. And so those are the three products we're coming out with immediately that are going to be produced in a manner that, again, will be appealing to the consumer. But immediately following that, there are going to be a number of post-harvest product or products that are produced from the extract of cannabis. And we've currently identified, again, about 25 to 30 products that we believe are going to be unique and going to allow us to produce branded products that are going to be sought after by certain consumer targets. And also white labeling is another area we see tremendous opportunity through various chains. There's a large chain here called Shoppers Drug Mart and various others. And white labeling is also a very common strategy for getting our higher quality product into the market. And that's what any business that's going to be sustainable has to be focused on, is quality products that are delivered with an exceptional degree of customer service or customer care. And those are the two strong pillars that our company is based on, truly. And quality means that you can't cut corners in the production methodologies. That means you're not introducing methods that are going to contaminate the product or expose it to disease, because this is the biggest risk in any cannabis production. And the advantage we have coming out just now, we're just releasing last week into the public markets, and I love the analogy of the oceans, where the ship has just been cast into the water now, and now we're putting up our sails and waiting for that wind to catch, and soon we'll be into the race. And we get to learn from our predecessors and the mistakes that they have made. They sort of hurried out, and there was an opportunity. They kind of hurried out, and a lot of them have not really thought through several of their operational methodologies carefully. And now they're really feeling the results. We heard of a large producer recently having to destroy an entire crop, millions of dollars of product at loss because of an outbreak. This is because they did not spend the extra effort in designing their facility in a way that will not only minimize but absolutely prevent any contamination. And being a pharmacist myself and being trained in pharmaceutical production and having an understanding of what is involved in producing medicine of high quality, what we bring in is an acumen of developing product at a level that is not really currently being done. So again, over the next 12 months, we're just out of the gates, but we'll be introducing a large pipeline of products, relationships that will help us produce these products at scale at lower cost. We'll be introducing new key hires that are people that are in the industry that are bringing their best practices to this sector and passionate about delivering quality medicine to those that need it, and expanding our footprint around the world. We see Canada as a very small market. Again, it's smaller than California, 35 million people or so. But the opportunity for Canada is to really export this product in countries like Germany. In Europe, you have 700 million people. In South America, you have over 400 million people. And in Asia, 4.5 billion people. More and more countries are coming online for medical cannabis. And the greater opportunity with us is producing cannabis that can be made in a certain format, which is called GMP. It stands for Good Manufacturing Practice. And very few facilities are designed in a manner that meet that high quality standard. And what that enables is us to produce product that can be exported to all these countries and recognized internationally as commercial grade. So the opportunity ahead is very exciting, and that is just the base building. Ultimately, we're preparing for markets like the U.S., where when legislation changes on a federal level, we will be very aggressive in finding bringing our technology into those markets and bringing our branded products ultimately into those markets. And we'll have a leg up at that stage, and hopefully a good coffer full of capital to make aggressive moves, unlike others that will not have sort of a regulated footprint like in Canada that currently exists, to really build a robust manufacturing base that involves a robust R&D platform where we're developing intellectual property both in strains as well as novel medical products, which ultimately will become recreational products as well that can be again produced on scale at efficient cost.
Mel, is your company going to export the products from Canada to other markets? I mean, you mentioned the U.S. Are you going to export anywhere else?
Absolutely. Before we actually enter the U.S., we will have entered a number of countries, including countries in Europe, such as Germany. We're looking at Portugal, Spain, a number of countries in Asia that are potentially coming online. South America is a big market that's beginning to come online, and I was just recently in South America looking at some properties in some ideal microclimates. There are areas in South America that produce a large percentage of the organic produce that is supplied around the world. And these environments, as mentioned before, places like China are getting ever more expensive. And we really looked at the lowest cost options available to produce global scale product. And so we're looking at destinations around the world that can allow us to produce product at scale and at a cost and at a quality that's going to meet our standards. So indeed, we will use Canada as a platform to conduct R&D to produce and begin sales of medical products. But ultimately, we will be looking at borders outside of Canada, beginning with. I get an email every week from Germany. When are you going to be able to distribute a product for it? And we will begin distributing products to Germany in as early as Q1 or Q2 of next year, when our product sales products channels come online, and that'll be an ever increasing stream to the European markets. And as our relationships with other producers increases and we can secure more and more supply, our methodology will not be limited to our own production. We will ultimately become a processing hub for the many microprocessors that are coming out soon, and many of the medium-sized producers that don't have the wherewithal to compete with some of the other larger players, and they're just wanting to focus on producing the product. They need viable channels to move their product, and that's what we want to represent. Not only offer them our technologies, our know-how in producing a low-cost quality product, but then giving them a channel to move that product into local and international markets.
Mel and Lior, I want to thank you both for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Let's start off with you, Lior. How can people check out your work?
First of all, we ran through a fact check, and our analysis has been approved by Pure Global Cannabis's management. And you can go to wealthresearchgroup.com/pure and download a detailed report about our own due diligence into this company. And that's one thing. Obviously, if you want to get involved with the newsletter, then go to wealthresearchgroup.com and hit the homepage, sign up. The Wealth Research letter is about generic information, personal finance, but it's also about specific opportunities. As you know, we talked about this, I think, off the air, but we were one of the first newsletters in the world to cover Ethereum, for example, at $15 per coin. We have obviously covered cannabis companies in the past that have more than doubled. Pure Global Cannabis is our number one play for cannabis in the next few years. This is a brilliant company, and one of the few that I believe will become a leading exporter out of Canada, and that is massive.
Mel, once again, how can people get in touch with your company and get in touch with you?
Thanks, Dave. Our website is pureglobal.com, and we have a lot of information there about our team, about our model. You can also enter your information on the Get Pure sheet, and you can get our deck